Oh, there's Kiryu. This is
at the dollar store.
This movie is just Kiryu goes to the dollar store. Oh, here we go. Random fights.
Yeah.
That's Yakuza.
Yeah. Hi, welcome to today's episode of Lost Without Translation at the Movies. I'm Michelle.
And I'm Mike. And today is the first episode of our very special Yakuza coverage. We are going to, in celebration of Yakuza 0 coming out this week, go through, we got 3 episodes, I think, planned of Yakuza stuff. It's one of my favorite Japanese series. I think it's one of my favorite series, period.
Today's episode, we're going to be talking about the live-action movie, Yakuza Like a Dragon, directed by Takashi Miike. It came out March 3rd, 2007 in Japan, and it was released in the US on DVD in 2010.
It's called Like a Dragon Yakuza, which is the original Japanese name of the series. And yeah, by legendary Takashi Miike, who makes some really amazing movies and also some really not so good movies. He is probably the most prolific Japanese director right now. But he makes so much stuff, and some of it is really good, and some of it is not so good. Like, at his best stuff, he's on par with, like, Tarantino, but at other stuff, it's just, it's so crazy and slapstick and silly, and it just doesn't come off good. And sometimes it really works. Like, he did the Phoenix Wright movie, which was so good. It was so silly, but it fit the game so perfectly. Yeah, not his greatest work. It's also, I think, not his worst, but it is somewhere in the middle there.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say it's a great Yakuza movie. Like, I mean, if you're a big fan of the series, like, there are things, like, there are homages to the games that are nice, a nice touch. But, I mean, overall, I feel like he didn't put enough attention to that core story that fans would want to see.
Yeah. It's really hard to know who he made it for, right? It's not really, it doesn't really seem like it's for, it maybe in his mind it was for Yakuza fans, because it does some of that stuff really well, but it's definitely not for anyone else.
Yeah.
Because we'll get to that when we get to the story.
Okay.
But yeah, it stars Goro Kishitami and Kazuki Kitamura.
But the casting itself was actually, I thought, really, really good. Like, that was my favorite thing, I think, from the movie.
Yeah, the casting is definitely, some of the casting is really what lets the movie actually have a chance of being good. It's based on the first game, so it covers the story of the first Yakuza game, which is an amazing story. It's written by a famous Japanese novelist who writes Yakuza crime stories, and he wrote. It's one of my favorite game stories. It's really good. It's really, it's got depth. It's got amazing characters. It's a really good crime story, but also it's just so fun.
It's also a really good character story. Like, there's a lot of emotion in it. There's a lot of character development. I mean, throughout the games, it's really nice.
It's a whole lot of what doesn't come through in the movie.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what?
Just walking down the street. Like,
if nothing else, at least I can love the Goro scenes.
I love how they even have, like, from the game, the different sized Yakuza. Like, there's the tougher boss in the back. Someone has a cone! The pylon! That's great.
Maybe we'll talk first about how it looks, because it looks gorgeous.
Oh, yeah.
Style is great. It looks so much like the games.
Yeah.
It's easy to do that when the games take place in Kamurocho is the name of the neighborhood, which is a fictional version of Shinjuku. But it's designed almost exactly like Shinjuku, and it looks just like Shinjuku. So they can shoot in Shinjuku, and it looks just like the game.
It feels authentic.
What's actually surprising is because we've been to Shinjuku, I didn't know how closely the games copied that neighborhood, right? Like, watching the movie felt more like watching the Yakuza neighborhood than than seeing the real Shinjuku. And I guess at that time we didn't have the vantage point to see that kind of layout of the area and how similar it was to the games, but it's pretty amazing to watch on film.
Yeah, definitely.
So before we get into the story, maybe we'll talk about the overall tone of the movie, because I feel like that's kind of where it's, you could love or hate it based on what it is. Because like we said earlier, it's such a serious story. There's a lot of fun in the games, but it's mostly tied away to, like, funny character interactions or weird side stories, but the core of it is really serious.
Yeah. And I feel like they did the opposite with this movie. I feel like there were a couple serious moments, but for the most part, it was a comedy and and not even more of slapdash or
Yeah. There was a couple real what would you call it? Just silly kind of moments in it that I can get away with a couple of them, but with how many there were, I just didn't really.
It got a little too campy.
Yeah, exactly.
For you want that you want it to be a little gritty, you want it to be a little Yakuza, a little tough, but there was very little of that. It was too silly. I wouldn't even call it a black comedy because it wasn't that black. It was, yeah.
It was kind of funny. I'll give it that. I didn't want comedy out of it, but I laughed quite a few times at the different side stories. Yeah. And every time I laughed, I was like, oh, I'm so frustrated because this is really funny, but this isn't Yakuza. I don't want to see this, But at the same time, it is kind of funny. So I guess if you're a fan of Yakuza and you want to see kind of a series of events that weren't in the game that you don't want to be in the game but are actually still kind of funny to watch. There was a couple good routines, I'd call it, right? Between the new characters that they put in. Well, not new, but the characters they focused on. So let's get right into this story.
Okay.
What's with all this comedy?
It's great.
The games are kind of funny, but not what are all these extra little
This is how they appeal to the general Yakuza hating audience in Japan.
What? These guys are still here?
Oh, it was like everyone took a lunch break. Those are all the hostages.
Yeah. I hope you played the games if you're going to watch this movie. Because if you haven't played the games, you have no idea what's going on. The games themselves are so complex. There's so much about the games that I didn't understand and still don't understand about how the Yakuza families are structured. Yeah, and they make it seem like all these families are somehow part of the same mafia, but they're always at war with each other or trying to one-up each other, and it's so hard to know who's on whose side. And what the games do really well is they bring in Kiryu, who's been out of the game for 10 years. And that's your kind of lens into the world as someone who has no idea what's going on and has to learn.
Right, so as he's figuring out what factions are at war and why, you get introduced to it, and it's a way to learn it without having it just laid out in front of you. Yeah. It's interesting that way, but they don't do it very well in the movie. I don't even feel like they really try. I feel
not even.
They throw out these names and terms, but you have no idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they start with, so the game starts beautifully. It starts with Kiryu's getting out of jail. He's returning to Kamurocho. And right from the beginning, he went to jail because he took the blame for his best friend killing, the head Yakuza boss. Yeah. And so he went to jail for 10 years, and he's just getting out. He's looking for his friend. He's looking for his old, the old girl he used to really like, and they're nowhere to be found.
There's none of that backstory.
Yeah.
It starts with the bank robbing scene for two characters that you never... they're not from the game. There's no relation to the original story. Just two people robbing a bank, and it's very silly the way they do it.
Yeah,
which I imagine
it's just really funny. Yeah. But it's not the way to open a movie. The movie focuses on these robbers so much, and it's if they were in the game, they were such a small part of it.
It almost feels like a throwaway scene, except that they go back to it throughout the movie, and they invest so much time in it. And there are really, I think, 3 or 4 or 5 different stories in the movie that they follow, and very few of them relate back to the main story. Yeah, which is frustrating.
The bank robber stuff is really funny, and it ties into the money that goes missing, because the whole point of Yakuza the game is this big bunch of money went missing. What did they say? 10 billion yen? Yeah. So $100 million, I think, went missing from the Yakuza's account, the Tojo clan's account, and it's causing all kinds of trouble throughout all the families. Right. And it just so happens to happen when Kiryu gets back. And the game follows Kiryu as he finds this little girl that he's trying to help her find her mother, and he's trying to find his friends, and he's trying to figure out what's going on with the clan. Whereas the movie puts that story on the back burner and focuses on, man, it's such a hot day in Tokyo. Yeah. It's so hot. Here's some guys robbing a bank. Here's some other people robbing stores. And the Kiryu stuff takes such a backseat to that. Yeah. To the point where even at the end of the movie, they don't tell you any of that. By the end of the movie, they don't tell you why he went to jail. They don't say any of that, how he relates to his friends, so that when his friends eventually do show up, it loses all impact. There's nothing
Because you don't care. Because you don't know his... Like, you don't have his motivation. You don't know any of that backstory. So you're just like, he's looking for someone. I don't really know who they are. I don't know why. I don't really care.
Yeah.
It's a disservice to the original story. Yeah.
So let's get into the other side story that takes up so much of the movie, which is the teenage girl and her boyfriend who are robbing things, which I think they may have been a side story in the game, but it didn't warrant that much attention in the movie at all. They own a lot of the movie. Yeah. A ton of the movie is them. At least. Yeah. And it's just these random people that have nothing to do. Because it never relates back to the main story in any way. I mean, at the very beginning, they're in that dollar store when Kiryu is jumped by some rival Yakuza, so they witness that. But then they just go off on their own storyline that in no way relates back. Mm-hmm. And they go for a long time. Yeah. I think this might have been one of the side stories, too. I wonder. But why would you focus on any of the side stories? Dump her. Yeah. Because she's just going to get you in trouble. Yeah. This shot is just to establish why he would even consider stealing for her. Yeah. Like, now you understand his motive. Yeah. And then the next up is the Korean mafia getting involved, right? And there's all these side stories about the Korean mafia who weren't in the first game at all, I'm pretty sure. I don't remember that at all. The Korean mafia plays a big part in Yakuza 2, but this character being there just adds all of this extra drama to things. Right. That, and really, we won't get into spoilers yet, but really changes the ending in a significant way. In a frustrating way, because it cancels out like what little motivation there was for one other character to do what they do, and it's. So that's our overall kind of the general synopsis of what's going on. Let's dive right into the characters, because I feel like that's kind of the saving grace of the movie. Right. So the guy who plays Kiryu is I forget the actor's name. He plays Niku Samurai, which we recently saw, which is great. He's really good. It's Kazuki Kitamura. Okay, yeah. He's been in a lot of things. Yeah, he was in Kill Bill 1 and 2. He was in a couple different things. Yeah. And he's really good. I like him in everything. He has like that perfect way of acting, like tough and like uninterested, but at the same time, like you can see he's a nice guy. Like you can see he has that good side, and it fits the character so well. And I feel like they didn't really get across in the movie what a badass he was. You know what? That's true. Right? Like you heard people say, "Oh, it's the legendary Kiryu," but like no one ever said in what way was he legendary. Like no one said why he went to prison. Like they left it way too vague. Yeah, and in the game he is the ultimate badass. He is like the top enforcer in the Yakuza before he went to jail. He messes up everybody. Next, let's talk about Goro Majima. Oh yeah, another fantastic casting choice. He makes the movie so perfect. This guy he hasn't done much. He makes the movie. Every time he's on screen is amazing, and he is such a flamboyant, weird Yakuza in the game, and it comes across so beautifully on film. I would almost believe that the character in the game was based on this actor. It was so perfect. It's like it was he just embodied the character like in a way that like as a fan you get excited to see him every time. And they really got across his characterization as like, here's this guy who is so insane, and he's got such a hard-on for Kiryu to mess him up, but they never explain why. They just say, there's one line that's like, oh, we got to settle this thing that started 10 years ago. But they never say what. And I feel like that was such a missed opportunity because it would have added so much depth to the story and the characters. Yeah. So before we get into spoiler talk, we should talk about Like a Dragon Prologue, which is I think it's the reason this movie doesn't make sense. It's a 4-part online series that Sega of Europe put out translated a year after the first game came out, and it was produced by Miike. And it is the story of Kiryu and his best friend Akira and Yumi growing up at this orphanage and becoming part of the Yakuza. And it ends with how the game it's a prequel to the game. So it shows everything up until he gets arrested. Until he's that crime happens and he takes the blame. And it really makes me interested to see how it's going to tie into Yakuza 0, if it's even going to tie into Yakuza 0 at all. But I think the reason this doesn't make sense is that the Miike expected everyone to have seen that first. And it's a shame because it really depowers this movie. I think Yakuza could be one of the best adaptations from game to movie, because it's such a strong story, it's so good characters, and it's just it's a really great movie, or it should be a great movie,
I mean,
and
there's
it just
so much
wasn't.
to work with. Yeah.
So
and I feel like it would have been an easy thing to like even take like the core story from that prologue and just put it in the beginning of this movie, just to give you that background for those who haven't seen it, just to understand a little more of the characters. And it's a shame you didn't just cut out one of those side stories and just put a bit more backstory in.
So, in general, the cons are this stupid shoplifting storyline.
Yeah.
Which would be, it's interesting on its own, but it amounts to like a Law and Order episode, right? Like, I don't need this in my Yakuza movie. The bank robbers story, which is really funny, but again, it's not I don't need this here. Yeah. The Korean mafia story, which again, like, just don't complicate an already complicated storyline. And just the lack of characterization, or the lack of any kind of storyline or backstory. But the pros are Majima. Every scene he's in is awesome. Yeah. Kiryu's portrayal, which is pretty good. Yeah.
And I really liked Haruka. I think that actress did a really good job. Like, she was really sweet, she was really cute, but she also had like that tougher side that I think fit the character really well. Growing up the way she would have, it was nice to see. And
the scenery, which is amazing.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
And the music. Let's see, because the music, some of it's ripped right out of the games.
Right,
which
I think I read there were 2 songs from Yakuza 2 that were in the movie, which you could hear them right away. It was perfect. Yeah.
So yeah, that's it. I mean, it's hard to know whether to recommend it.
I feel like as a fan, like you do want to see it just to see like those 2 characters come to life, and like to see like that city come to life. But I mean, you have to in your mind take into fact that it's not a great movie. Like it's really like you watch it just for fun, but don't like be invested to see a good Yakuza movie, because you will be disappointed.
I think you have to watch the prologue as a fan. If you haven't seen it or don't know about it, go find it. It's on YouTube. It's called Like a Dragon Prologue. You need to see it, even if you're not going to see the movie, because it leads up to the first game, and we'll see how it ties into Zero. I'm excited to see how it ties into Zero. But yeah, if you haven't played the first game, I don't think it's going to really convey that storyline very well. Yeah. And if you have played it, then it's maybe just cool to see some of these characters on screen.
I would say that's a fair assessment.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about spoilers in a little bit. If you want to stick around for that, please do. If you don't want to, then stay tuned later on. Like over the next couple of weeks, we're going to cover... we're going to do our real review of the Black Panther PSP game that we played a while ago. And we are going to, me and Cam are hopefully going to play the PS4 spin-off of Yakuza, which I don't even know what it's called, but we're going to play it.
The mystery Yakuza game.
All right. Thanks for checking us out.
Thanks. Bye.
All these scenes are just in here to be like, oh, you're getting excited for Goro's going to fight Kiryu? Nope. Here, watch this shit instead.
Yeah, just extra delays.
Yeah. Fine. Oh no!
Oh, shouldn't have called him bro. Everybody's baseball bat before too.
Yeah, but it's also like they're doing it silly on purpose instead.
That's great. Okay, so now we're gonna get into the spoilers for those that are still here. I would say, I think the biggest thing we have to talk about is that ending.
The ending was bullshit.
Yeah.
I can't believe they pulled that.
Like, they're building up. Like, I wouldn't say they're really building up because they don't mention it enough or describe it as much as they should. But they build up to the ending from the game with Yumi,
Akira,
who is Haruka's mother, and the money is piled up, and
the boss of Yakuza comes in to get the money back.
Right.
The game ends up with like this big Mexican standoff with all these people coming up to Millennium Tower to get the money. And they all the alliances become clear, and you start to see everything that's going on. And it's a big, amazing finale where Kiryu finally meets Akira again and gets to confront him. Haruka realizes that Yumi is her mom and finds her. And then everything just goes to shit. There's fights, there's a building blows up, the money raised down, and it's...
As soon as they said Millennium Tower, I got excited because I was thinking, like, that's going to be the fight. That's what this is building for. That's what we're waiting for. That will redeem this movie. Yeah. And I remember, too, like, we were excited, like, that's when we're going to see the back tattoo.
Oh, they ruined it.
And that was the first thing that was ruined. Yeah. Like, his jacket got blown off by a helicopter and it was just there. And I'm like, that's not what I wanted. Like, you want him to rip it off. You want it to be dramatic.
It's such a little gripe, but
I feel like it's a big deal, though. Like, it's
the most iconic picture, I think, of Yakuza is Kiryu standing with his back tattoo.
Yeah, you want to see, like, those fantastic back tattoos. Like, because that's what a Yakuza is. Like, you want to see this, like, physical representation of
he's got the dragon, Kira's got the carp, and they're going to go at it.
Yeah.
And they held off on showing the tattoo for the whole movie. So we started to think, like, oh, when they do show it, it's going to be, like, a great game scene.
They showed him topless for a bit, and then they covered his back before you could see it, and I was like, oh,
they're waiting.
And then you get excited, because he's walking around with just the jacket over his shoulders. You're like, any second now he's going to pull it off.
No.
As soon as he gets to that tower.
Yeah.
But he wasn't even at the tower, it just blew off, and I'm like...
it blew off and shows it early, where it's like, I don't want to see that. I want to see the two of them looking at each other, ready to fight, and then he rips off his and shows his tattoo, and the other guy rips off his and shows his tattoo, and shit's gonna go down. But no, they blew their wad early. It was a shame.
And then the fight itself was disappointing.
Lame. Oh, because Kiryu's fucked up. By the time he gets there, he's supposed to be tired in the game, but he's stabbed. He's dying, and he can't hold his own until, and I can't believe they did this, he pulls out they hinted earlier, they showed a fridge. It was a nice little, like, Easter egg, but they focused on it for way too long, where they show a fridge full of all the health items in the game.
The Stamina X, Stamina Spark. Yeah.
And so he gets the shit beat out of him at the tower, and then when you least expect it, it actually shows him take a drink.
Just, like, chug it down, like, for at least 10 seconds, and everyone's just like, whoa! And I'm like, why are you letting him drink it then?
I'm half surprised he didn't have a health bar on the screen. It just went all the way back up.
You know what? If they'd gone that far, I might have been like, okay. But, like...
It was like so Scott Pilgrim that just didn't fit.
But
it just didn't fit. And it really was like, okay, this is what this movie is.
But then even after that, the fight wasn't that fantastic. No. Like, I mean, I'm thinking now, I'm like, I can't really remember.
I can't remember him fighting Akira really well. When he beat up all the other people, it was only memorable because they having the heat sparks fly out of his punches that were really lame. But I can't remember his fight with Akira at all.
So I feel like that was really a missed opportunity and a disappointment. And then, he gets to, he passes that. He goes on. We meet Yumi. And it's very anticlimactic. You've been looking for Haruka's mother throughout the movie. And then they didn't treat that very well either. It was very like, here she is. Continue with the story.
If that last like 10 minutes of the movie was what the game was, I could have probably appreciated it a little more. And then all those scenes with a helicopter flying around the city causing all kinds of trouble that was just didn't fit. Like the helicopter does fly into the tower with the boss, and the Korean guy takes out the boss. Kiryu doesn't even get to talk to him or fight him.
It's like Yumi dies for nothing because he's
already
dead. Like they snipe him. And then she detonates the bomb.
It's like this big plan that they put in place of it's Akira and Yumi put this big plan into place to get revenge on this guy. They wait years to put this plan into motion, and when they finally do, it doesn't even matter because the Korean guy shot him 5 minutes earlier anyway.
Right, and it was like really angering. Because it's like, well, what a waste of like all this storytelling, like this whole character, all of her motivation. Like Haruka suffers for no reason. Like all these people like who have motivation in this, and it's like, and someone just shoots him. It's such a waste.
It snipes him like from far away, not even up close or anything. Brutal. Anyway, what else? Samus Bark, those storyline with the robber kids, like this girl wanted to rob everything, keep getting more and more money, and turns out she owed money to a loan shark, and she was either pregnant with his kid or had to have his kid as payment for not being able to pay back the money. But unclear. It didn't even make sense, and I didn't care.
But like if they were trying to get an emotional reaction, they made the characters so unlikable that you didn't care, and every time they were on the scene, you're just like, we're back to them. And like even at the end, like when you know that she's gonna die, and like all these horrible things have happened, and they walk past the convenience store where the boyfriend worked, and like I imagine they're trying to convey this feeling of like, look how much has happened in this day, like look who we used to be, but you really don't care because you don't care about the characters because of the way they filmed it. So that was disappointing as well.
And Date, the inspector from the game, who's not crooked, but he's kind of He's kind of playing the lines in the game, and in this, it was just a waste. They did nothing with him.
Oh yeah, like I feel like they put him in because they're like, oh, people will want to see him. We'll put him in, but they didn't give him any real part of the story, and it was disappointing.
And the bank robbers, every scene of the bank robbers was funny. You know,
it was.
They go to the bank to rob it, and there's no money there, so they're stuck there in a hostage situation. And then they like order food, and they have all kinds of fights. They yell each other's names at each other, and it's just a bunch of like every time they're on screen is a new comedy bit.
Yeah, but it's not. You know, it's
not
at the same time you can't appreciate because it's a waste of time that should have been spent on the real story.
But every scene with Goro.
I would have watched an entire movie with just Goro and Kiryu talking.
That's what Yakuza 4 is, the Goro movie. Yeah, I can't wait for more Goro. I hope he's in Yakuza 0. Of course he's going to be in Yakuza 0. Probably read on the cover. He's great. Anyway, I think that's really all we can say about Yakuza.
Yeah, that covers it.
Yeah, watch the prologue if you're going to see it, or you just watch the prologue anyway. It's old, it's not great quality, but it's important for the game.
Yeah.
And stay tuned for our other Yakuza episodes. Till next time, Mike.
I'm Michelle. Bye. He's clearly looking for locker keys.